Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. With the going rate of divorce at more than 1 out of 2 people happening here in America, we strive to find out what is the best way to be able to not only be in a good relationship, but to find balance so that we can avoid what seems to be inevitable. It is this particular experience of divorce that set our guest off on the path of self-reflection, research, and observation, which became the basis of a project that he created, which is to help guide many through the often confusing maze of emotions and decisions with clarity and insight. It's all about knowing yourself and what will truly make you fulfilled in your relationship based on building awareness and seeing trends of your needs and experiences, which is what our guest is telling us. And his approach has been validated by hundreds of people in different stages of healthy as well as unfulfilling relationships. Our guest today is a media and technology executive who has created a breakthrough in a project called the Relationship Barometer. I'd like to welcome the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Michael Gabriel. Michael, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today.
Thanks so much for having me, Daniel.
Now, through your experience, you reached out to technology and you have created something that helps people to come to understand this. Tell us about all this. This sounds very intriguing.
Sure, and you summed it up at the beginning when you talked about the odds of having a relationship that doesn't end in divorce. It's about a coin toss, and those aren't good odds for a decision that's really that important. So when I was going through my own situation, you think you're an intelligent person and you think you're sort of aware of what's happening and whether you're happy or not in a relationship. But very often, I think we're sort of like, and after watching The Walking Dead last few nights ago, it's like we're relationship zombies sometimes. We're sort of just walking around wandering without really being aware of what's happening to us and how it's affecting us until it becomes often too late. And in my situation, when I was going through a divorce, I was trying to understand, how could this happen? Like, how could you date someone, go through the whole courting ritual, get engaged, get married, have a child, and realize that you're just not right for each other? Not necessarily that anyone did anything wrong, just you really found out that you're not making each other happy in terms of what you're looking for in life or what you're not looking for. So I started to reflect, usually over a cigar and bourbon on my porch, and that always helped me. And I was just trying to think about what was going on. Like, were there things I missed that I maybe could have seen but wasn't aware of? Or were there things that I sort of noticed but figured they'll just get better? And I just started contemplating about that for myself initially to try to just figure it out as I was going through this sort of healing process, but also to try to help my daughter, who at that point was 7 years old, and I didn't want her to go through a similar thing. And I wanted to see if there was some insight I could gain that as she grew up, I'd be able to provide her some guidance on. And that was really the start of this.
Now, you created what is known as a Relationship Barometer app. Seems we've got apps for just about everything this day and age, but tell us how this can help people improve relationship if it does.
So that came about after I actually got the book written, and a lot of people liked it, but I realized from my own experience and from what I heard from others that a lot of times you read self-help books, and after you read them, even if you like them, you sort of put them back in the bookshelf or on the table, and you just go on with your life. There's nothing to really help you use that day to day after you've finished reading it, unless you're really very focused on doing that. And given my technology background and the kinds of things I saw people using today, if you want to manage your money, you use something like Quicken. You want to manage your health, you use a relationship like Fitbit. So I sort of said, maybe I could sort of turn the book concepts into like a Fitbit kind of thing for relationships, and started trying to think of how you could use it and have it be part of your life to record the experiences you feel, like what's making you feel good, what's making you feel bad. And the concepts of the book were focused on trying to see if you could forecast, like, are there predictability kind of aspects, like with a weather forecast, where based on wind speed and humidity and other factors, you could sort of forecast generally what the direction of the weather is. Is it going to be sunny or is it going to be stormy? And it's not an exact science, but it's based on principles that certainly matter. And I said, I wonder if there are certain factors in a relationship that could help you predict where it's going, and if it looks like it's headed stormy, where, what's causing that, and could you actually do something about it and see if you can affect it positively? Or if it looks like it's sunny, terrific, let's just keep aware of what's happening, because most relationships don't start off bad. They almost all start off great. They're all sunny. And then things happen. And we either do or don't take actions that impact that 50% coin toss to either have the relationship end or not.
Now, it's interesting you talk about how relationships, they start off and they're fantastic. You see all the colors, everything seems clear, and then once you're in a relationship of commitment, it seems to fade. And my question would be interested into, why is it we want to throw our best feathers forward, create such expectation in someone else about what direction a relationship is going to go, then find ourselves disappointed and potentially in divorce when things just don't seem to go that way? It's almost like we're saying, we really don't want to work that hard, do we?
Yeah, and that's really an interesting question, Daniel, because when I talk to people about these concepts, there's almost universal acceptance. It's apple pie in baseball. Like everyone says they want to have a good relationship. Everyone says that they want to try to fix problems before they get too big. And pretty much everyone says, I don't want to be in a bad relationship, an unhealthy relationship, one that's boring or unfulfilling. So we all sort of agree on that, but when it gets down to actually looking at your relationship, it's a very emotional area, and people don't get as emotionally attached to money normally or to their health and fitness normally. This is really something that hits us down into our soul. And when we fall in love, there's a phrase, crazy in love. And it actually is based on reality. When we do fall in love, the hormones, the chemicals that our bodies create, dopamine and norepinephrine, they're the kinds of things that just make everything look better. Like you said, colors are brighter and everything looks great. It affects the way we think. It affects the way we act. And it sort of distorts things in a really good way in the beginning because it feels great, but just like any drug or anything that affects us emotionally in a positive way, when you get that drop-off afterwards, when you get that down, all of a sudden things actually seem worse. So we're in a stage in the beginning where everything seems really good and rosy and we want to be in our best behavior, and maybe we don't act our normal way that we would with our friends because we don't want to screw this up. So we're not being ourselves. That probably happens on both sides fairly often. And then over time, as that euphoria starts to wear off, people also over time start to fall into the normal behaviors. And then you start to see things that maybe aren't so great, but it's really tough emotionally to deal with that because most people, other than maybe Mr. Trump, don't like conflict. Like most people really don't like to get into confrontational situations, especially with someone that you may be in love with or may have been in love with.
You know, this is always such an interesting conversation because of the fact that I remember years ago, for instance, you have the relationship coach, Barbara DeAngelis, Making Love Work. Mm-hmm. And I thought what she said, and this was back in the late 80s, I remember seeing this, is that we fall in love with people because of how they make us feel about ourselves. But you realize what a folly that can be because someone else can't continue to make you feel great about yourself for the rest of their lives. Mm-hmm. And I think when you see that kind of expectation into the mix and you realize people only have so much energy to reach outside of themselves to make circumstances perhaps better for something else or someone else, you realize maybe I should wake up and see how I can feel good about myself first before taking this into a relationship and expecting somebody else to do this for me. What do you say to something like that?
I actually agree with it wholeheartedly. If you're not happy, if you're not in a good place yourself, well, someone might be able to help you. They might be able to give you support just in being there and being there for you emotionally and physically, but they're not necessarily going to fix your problems, nor should they need to. And in fact, most people don't want someone to fix their problems, especially women. When we, as guys, I'm sure this has probably happened to you once or twice too, when you're dating someone or you're married and they have a problem, we want to jump in and fix it. And that's the worst thing that we could usually do. They're just reaching out to us, not necessarily for us to fix it, but to get support, to get validation, to be there in case they ask us, but not necessarily to try to just jump in and fix things. So people often are placed into those situations where they've got to be, the one that corrects the person's problems with their job. Like if you have a really bad situation at work, could be you don't feel you're paying well enough, you're getting passed over for promotions, you have a tough or bad boss or coworkers that you don't like to work with, or tough clients. That's tough. That's really tough. You're doing that 8-10 hours a day, and then you're coming back to your partner, and you're not in a great mood. And they can't fix that. Like, there's really not much they could do about that other than be supportive for you. If you don't fix that situation, you're going to be cranky, you're going to be irritable, it's going to start to drag on the relationship, and it's going to affect it adversely. So I agree totally. That's just one example of a situation we often face where it impacts negatively our relationship with our partner. And it's about our own self-awareness, both with the relationship and outside of the relationship, that really matters.
I sometimes think, too, especially in America, where we tend to lean toward media and entertainment as ways to show us how we believe we should be, is that there is this sort of Cinderella at the ball syndrome, that happily ever after once we're together situation, once we find the so-called soulmate. You hear that thrown around quite a bit. And again, as I was suggesting earlier in the program, we set ourselves up with these tremendous expectations of how it's going to turn out, and when those basically disappoint us, well, that's the end of the relationship. I guess this just isn't supposed to work, or this isn't meant to be. But I found that in a good relationship, and certainly you can kind of share your own insights here, but that in being together as a couple, I think it's important to go through those worst times together, those moments that you might be laying in bed at night realizing the awesome responsibility or adversity that you might face the next day, and you're laying there just awake at night wondering, how are we going to get through this? What are we able to do here? When you finally find yourself perhaps stepping through that adversity and growing and learning, and you realize, things do get better, and this is probably the best rule of relationship because it brings that out inside of you, those things that you really should work on that can make a relationship not only balanced, but stronger and better. Mm-hmm. What are your experiences about something like this?
So it's definitely a factor that we don't pay enough attention to. In my book, I have a section about time is on your side in terms of relationships, and a number of quotes related to taking actions quickly rather than seeing how things progress over time. Time tells you pretty much everything you need to see. And if you don't see someone and how they react through adversity, I don't think, at least from my background and perspective, that you really get to know that person. Everyone's great when the going's good. I mean, who's really bad when everything's going well?
Isn't that true?
Yeah, but that's unfortunately not life. Like, we have our good times, but we also are going to have bad times. It could be anything: health, jobs, our relationships, just conflict on things. And it's how you deal with that and really trying to understand what matters to you. So when I was thinking about well, why did I date my ex-wife? Like, what attracted me to her physically or otherwise? What did I see when we were first dating? Like, why did we continue dating? And what did I see that maybe I didn't make me feel good, which could be things I may have wanted or not wanted, or also on her side, things she may have wanted from me to do or not to do, because you experience both of those things. And I tried to simplify it, because as I thought about things, I said, on one hand, inertia takes hold. Newton's law of inertia, an object in motion continues in motion. And we've heard about that, and it applies to a lot of aspects of life. Staying at a job too long, staying in a place, a city you may not really love, but you just continue because you've been doing it, and staying in a relationship that you've been in just because you've been in it. Momentum takes hold. And over time, as you experience things, which I call emotional tethers in my book, they're ties that tie to your heart and your feelings. As you experience those things, those tethers anchor you to that person emotionally, for good or bad sometimes, and it makes it hard to pull away. So I said, well, that's all fine and good, but if that were totally the only thing in play, no one would ever break up, because the tethers would always keep you bound. So I said, there's something else that's got to be going on, and I started thinking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And while that applies to life in general, your relationship needs are very different, and they actually are very different from person to person, whereas Maslow's needs really are pretty much universal for everyone in terms of what you're looking for, and safety and self-actualization and things like that. So I said, with a relationship, what was I really looking for? And I said, there are things I got to have, things that really give me deep foundational pleasure. And they could be physical, they could be emotional. But if I wasn't getting any of those things, and there were a few I wasn't, I started to feel deprived. Like I'm not getting what I really, really want. And I thought about that and noted it. And then I said, but in the beginning of the relationship, when we were just dating, those things really weren't the key things. There were things we just did that were fun. We used to watch late-night kung fu movies, which I always got a kick out of. And we used to go to nice restaurants and go to fun events and go to the beach and whatever. Just fun activities and things to do. And that's really what kept us going in the beginning, but those things weren't foundational. They were just fun activities that made the relationship fun and enjoyable, not necessarily fulfilling long-term. And then there were things that bothered me about our relationship, things I didn't want. And I call those the gotta-not-haves. And those are the things that give you pain. And hopefully not physical, because should never be tolerated in a relationship, but the emotional pain that you go through, severely just uncomfortable with a situation. And it could be anything. It could be if someone yells at people, treats them badly, and that's just not your value system. And every time you hear that, that could make you just really, really uncomfortable, really angry. And if those things are happening in your life, the gotta-not-haves, those are the big items that actually, I think, create the breakups. So all of a sudden I said, instead of Maslow's hierarchy, let's have a structure of gotta-haves, like-to-haves, and gotta-not-haves, so that you could really try to understand what's happening in your relationship and how important are those things to you, and how well are you getting them or not, based on your experiences.
Now, let's talk about the app. I think this is pretty interesting when it comes to an app that helps you to determine whether or not your relationship is balanced, the things you can be doing to help improve the relationship. Just tell us how this whole thing works here.
So I start off in a simple way. Initially, as part of the onboarding process, when people use the app, I would ask them to enter their needs, like what's important to you, and categorize it as a gotta-have, a like-to-have, or a gotta-not-have to start. And I found out people got stuck. Like if you were to ask people, what are the things you gotta have or gotta not have and like to have, very few people actually could say right off the bat, this is my list. And it started to become a blockage to using the app. So I went to an approach that someone who I work with actually tried it out with his girlfriend. And he created a list of needs, gotta haves, like to haves, gotta not haves, based on our conversations, and asked her to go through it and pick things. And she picked a whole bunch of things, and I thought maybe too much, because it's almost like going to a buffet at a restaurant. You see everything, and you never would have ordered all those things off the menu if it was a la carte, but yeah, it's all there on the buffet table. Yeah, I want this, and I want this, and I want this, and I want that. And that concerned me initially, so I didn't go with that. But then I changed to say, let's give people a start, and let's try to give them guidance and say, pick the things that you're either getting now for good or bad, gotta haves or gotta not haves. You're experiencing them, or things that you're not experiencing that you actually want to experience. They're really on your mind. So the list gives them a starting point to just get their minds going in terms of what are the things you really want or don't want, or the fun things you like to do. And that's a pretty fast process. People usually go through that in a matter of minutes. And you pick your items, and then you say for each item, how do you feel about it now? How well do you feel that is being met? Is it happening a lot, or never, or a little? And we use a weather metaphor to actually allow you to rate whether you're getting, and that weather is not the weather outside, but whether you're getting...
I noticed the little clouds on here on the app, and a little storm, and then the sunshine, and then the sunshine slightly behind the cloud, and I'm thinking, well, I guess that's an interesting way to look at it. Use the weather scenario.
Yeah, I sort of said, how do you do it easily? And a lot of people have used 1 to 10, or a number system, or a smiley face system, or there are a lot of ways, but I said, you know what? If something's good, we always say, it's a sunny day. And if something's bad, usually we say it's stormy. So I said, we're all comfortable with the weather, and the barometer is actually a weather device, and it's a forecast of where it looks like things are going. So let's relate our needs, I call them, and they're needs or values or qualities you're looking for, but we call them needs in the app. And we say, rate how sunny or stormy that is. It doesn't have to be perfect. Whether it's totally sunny or mostly sunny doesn't really matter that much, but whether it's very sunny or very stormy really does matter a lot. So go through that. Just move the sliders, and maybe you're picking, 5 to 10 maximum of each. So you're moving the sliders, and then after you finish that, we show you a forecast of, based on what you're saying you want or don't want, and how well you're getting it, where it looks like your relationship is headed, and that's the initial forecast. And it's directional. And if it comes out pretty sunny, that's good. If it comes out pretty stormy, well, you'll be able to look and see why, because you'll be able to see which of your needs are stormy. And that's the start of this whole self-awareness situation. But then you actually have to go in and say, okay, this is how I feel overall, I think, but what's really happening in my relationship? So if there were any events that happened recently, good or bad, sunny or stormy, we have a feature called a check-in. And it's like a diary or a journal. And you enter the experience you had and how it made you feel, sunny or stormy, to whatever degree. And then we ask you to relate it to one of the needs that you created, to say, is this supporting one of your needs, or is it actually hurting one of your needs? So you start to become aware of how your relationship is meeting what you're looking for or not. And as you do that, there's a little trend graph that you can see that shows your experiences over time to see, well, how many sunny things are happening in my relationship versus how many stormy things. How often are they happening? Are they happening to gotta not haves, or are they happening to like to haves? So you could see what matter of degree. And you start to see trends of, are you having a lot of bumpy times or a lot of up and down times? Your relationship is a roller coaster? Or is it actually pretty good? And depending on what you see, you either just can be in a monitoring mode where you continue to journal things and try to keep things good, because again, as we said, things start off good, but they go bad. They usually don't go bad overnight. they go bad over time. And if you see those trends, you might be able to do something, communicate, work with your partner to address those stormy situations before they get ingrained or before they build up so much that you just can't take it anymore and you just break up.
Now, as you've had this out here, what has been the response from people who have actually used this?
I was very surprised by some of the responses. It really caused me to step back a little bit because I was trying to think of a demographic that this approach might apply to. Like, is it mainly good for people that are married and in a situation where they're feeling unfulfilled, or is it good for people that are just at the point where they really need to decide, should I stay or should I go, and what should I do about this? And there were two examples that came to me through our initial rollout that surprised me. And they were both women in this case, both in their mid-40s, both in relationships that were more than 10 years. And one was in a really good relationship, she thought, and the other was in a really bad relationship. And the one in a really good relationship said, I thought my relationship was good. I was happy with my marriage, but after using your app, and I thought the shoe was going to drop down, she was going to say, my marriage really is bad, and I'm getting a divorce, and I was going to be like, that, I feel guilty about it, even though it brought awareness. But that wasn't the case. She said, I became more aware of all the things my husband was doing that I was just taking for granted, like all the good things he was doing for me, how he was helping me around the house and with the kids, and just the nice things that he was doing that I wasn't paying attention to. And after really focusing on my experiences and how I'm feeling and recording them, I actually feel better about my marriage, even better than I did, because I thought it was good, but it's actually terrific. And that was great. I was so happy to see that. The other woman was in a situation where the relationship wasn't good. And that's painful for people because we're showing you your pain points, and not a lot of people want to see that. But she actually said, I knew we had issues, but I knew I wasn't really happy, but I couldn't pinpoint exactly why. And after I started paying attention to the things that were disappointing me, that I wasn't getting that really bothered me, in addition to the good things, I saw that, we had a lot of things that were good. We also had specific things that were bothering me that I could now try to focus on and try to improve and find out whether I can improve them or not. And that was good to see because she wasn't taking it as just a negative, just trying to find fault, because that'll doom any relationship if all you're focused on is the negative aspects. And I saw two people in those situations that reacted in different ways, but I also saw a woman in a bad relationship say, all it does is show me everything that's bad with my relationship, and she was unhappy with the app because she wasn't of the mindset of wanting to actually tackle it, or she was feeling so overwhelmed with it, or maybe she was feeling trapped and this was just showing her all the things that were negative. But staying in a situation blindly, or just staying in a situation that's making you miserable, is rarely a good choice. So I found out that this app is really for people of a psychographic, the way they think, people that want to be aware, people that want to take action, and either acknowledge the good, make sure their partner knows about all the good that's happening, and not take it for granted, or to really at least be aware of the bad and the stormy things, and decide whether they want to take an action on, maybe one, to see if they could work with their partner to improve that a little. And it goes both ways. If you're in that situation, you clearly want your partner to be able to express to you if there are things you can do to make the relationship better for them. So that way it's not all one-sided.
Well, it certainly seems to be that way in relationships where people find that stormy cloud, and a lot of times what they'll tend to do is say, well, this is what you're doing that's causing me to think or feel this particular way, and I can see how, as you have produced this app and people work with it, as well as the book that you have that goes along with it, is they begin to realize that in a relationship, as you were saying, well, we can't always keep our best feathers or we can't always be our best selves. Eventually people are going to find us out, those, let's call them the darker sides or those lesser sides of us. And that's where I think a lot of times you'll see people who are chronic relationship people who go from one relationship to the next realize, well, I really don't want to see this. I don't want them seeing it. I'm on my way. But the reality is, hey, if you start working at that, perhaps this relationship is the best thing that could happen to you because you become better as a result of A, observing, and B, taking action to doing those things or perhaps effecting those changes that can make things better, not just for you, but also for the partner that you may have in your life.
You're definitely right on target, Daniel, and you talked about that earlier in terms of a relationship being something you need to put work into. It doesn't flow. I don't think I know of one person who says, my relationship's great and we don't even talk about it. We don't do it. It's great. It's just great because it's great. The people I know that have really great relationships normally are people who were very aware of what they were looking for and not, very good at learning how to communicate that to their partner in a non-threatening, non-nagging kind of way, just really into, in a lot of cases, people say, I really love you so much. I love being with you. An example I just actually saw was someone's spouse is starting to work longer hours and isn't home as much. And this is actually a guy, and his wife is working longer hours. And he's starting to wonder what's going on. Like, why is she staying out later? And he loves her. And they have a good relationship when they're together, but he's just seeing less of it. And he's, of course, thinking the worst in terms of what may be happening. But he doesn't know. He doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't know the pressures at work. He doesn't know if she's going out with work people, her boss, whoever, whether she's just unwinding with friends because of the pressure. But he didn't express and hasn't really talked to her about it in terms of I really love being with you, and we've done so many fun things, but recently it seems like you've been stretched. I really would love to have more time with you and just talk about it. Is anything going on at work? Is there anything he can do to help? Any way they can try to just get a little more time together? And he just didn't know. And that not knowing starts to create a lot of internal stress. It affects, I'm sure, the way he reacts to her when she comes home or doesn't come home when he expects her. So it's work, and it's important to do that. Like, if the relationship's important to you, if you want it to be good and fulfilling and healthy, it does take work.
Well, it's just fascinating because to give our listeners an understanding of how your app is that in real time you're basically working with it on, stages or aspects of your relationship. So you get an overall picture of how things were, potentially how they could be, but in the moment, that's where you're really living from, and that's where a relationship really has its goal, doesn't it?
It really does, and the area that I'm looking to work on, both with respect to the further enhancement of the book as well as the continuing enhancement of the app, is what do you do when you have problems? And clearly, you're dealing with conflict resolution skills, you're dealing with communication skills, and how to do that. I have guidance in the book that is very generalized based on principles of dealing with issues that I've learned from a work environment, but also from a social environment. You can't fix everything at once. There's a phrase like trying to boil the ocean. Like, you can't take on such a big task of everything. You need to pick and choose and try to pick some things that you feel you can have some success on. So if you had, 5 issues in your relationship that you thought areas that could be better, ideally, you'd pick one of them that you think you're more likely to have success with for whatever your own personal reasons are, that may not be as confrontational or hard to deal with initially, just to start that discussion going. Because if you could pick something that is less sensitive maybe and make progress on that, that makes the next one easier. And now you already have a way of communicating and making something a little better, and then you can try to go to the next one, and of course do the same on your partner's side, so that way it doesn't have to always be a quid pro quo in terms of that kind of balance. I did something good for you, now you have to do something good for me.
Right.
If it becomes a game, a war of who's doing the most good things, then that's probably not good unless you're really competitive and you both like that, in which case, great.
Right.
But it really becomes a how do you work on it. So in the app, we actually have an area that was suggested to us by a lot of the initial users that is a bunch of relationship articles that we keep adding to. And they could be on everything from breakups or dating or how a good marriage or a good relationship or conflict. And we put them out there and got feedback that people liked to look through them to try to get ideas, tips. They're from all different publications. Could be a psychology magazine, could be Cosmo, could be anything, could be Esquire. And people like that. I'm actually looking now to augment that in the next few months to make it a little easier for people to find help. And I'm going to probably focus on two aspects more than others. The balance in the relationship is actually the balance of pleasure and fun versus pain in very simple emotional terms. The more pleasure and fun you're having relative to the less pain you're having, the better your relationship generally is going to be. So if you can improve a gotta have, you're going to get more deep pleasure because that's something that matters a lot to you that you want. If you can add some like to haves that are fun to your relationship, well, that's going to add some nice fun variety, keep things from getting stale. Not foundational, but nice to do, and those might be things you want to work on first because they're not as emotional. And if you could reduce the storminess of a gotta not have, you're going to reduce pain by definition. It's something you don't want you're getting, and you're getting a lot of it because it's really stormy. If you start to get less of it, if it was happening every day and now it's once a week, that's better. And if it then goes to once every 2 weeks, even better. It's a good trend. And that kind of trend would be reinforced. It's like, I really appreciate that you're not doing this that often anymore. It's really great. I'm feeling better about it. Thank you. And you'll start to see, hopefully, that it happens less and less if things are going well. Or if you're not able to address that one, maybe you then go to another one because you don't want to beat your head against the wall on something that may be unfixable. Doesn't mean your relationship is over. It just means this one aspect might be one that you can't address. Or maybe you address it with coaching or therapy. Maybe you need some outside help. But that's something you do over time. And if someone is using the app on a frequent basis and recording these things and looking at articles and trying some things out, they're going to see over time, are things getting better or worse? Where are they getting better or worse? And it starts to just give you information to either come to some conclusion of things are the way they are, and they're not as great as I'd like them to be, but overall the balance isn't bad. I'm good enough. I'm happy enough to stay in this relationship. Or, wow, it's getting better, or, ooh, it's actually getting worse, and do I really want to continue in that? And that's where you have to take your own personality, your own life situation into account as to whether you want to end that relationship or not. But the main thing is being able to see the information in front of you so that you're not just being delusional. And there's a phrase which I use sometimes, love is blind. You don't have to be. You don't have to be. It doesn't mean we take the love and passion out of it, but make sure you're aware of your experiences is really what the app is focused on, trying to help train you to do.
And not to mention, too, I think what's important, and you were stating this, is that, be patient with yourself. You don't have to become Mr. or Mrs. Perfect overnight. This is about becoming perfect together over time, isn't it?
It really is. And it's also an understanding what really matters to you. An example I've used, which might be a little superficial to some, but it actually seemed to matter to me in the beginning was when I dated someone right after I had gone to a Napa Valley really nice wine trip, and I really got into red wine. And I started dating this person not that far after that. And as you talk about things and what you like to do and whatever, I mentioned that, and I mentioned, really found some great red wines. And she said, yeah, I really, I would like to drink red wine, but I can't. It bothers me. It just, affects me badly. I like white wine. And the first thought that came into my head was like, oh, no, I'm not going to be able to, order a nice bottle of red wine when we go out to dinner, and it's going to affect the way I want to appreciate a meal, because now I can't share this, which I really liked doing in certain prior relationships. And she'd mentioned that she didn't eat meat, although I don't have any problem with someone being vegan, but at that time, it was like, oh, now, red wine and meat are a nice combination. And I thought that those were gotta-haves for me. I gotta have someone who can enjoy a steak and enjoy red wine with me. And over a little bit of time, I started drinking white wine a little more. She didn't care if I had red wine. She just couldn't. And I realized that really wasn't that important. Like, who she was, how we interacted. There were so many other good things about the relationship that I enjoyed that was a little adjustment, but it wasn't like a foundational thing for me. It turned out to be non-important. The gotta-have turned into turned into like-to-have, in terms of it was something I would have liked to have, but that's okay. Red wine, white wine didn't make a difference. And I think there were a lot of times where we're set. We're fixed. Gotta have this. If someone doesn't have these qualities, they're not for me. And we come up with these long lists of things, some of which may really matter to us, and some of which maybe not so much.
Unfortunately, too, Michael, the fact is nowadays when you go out to a restaurant and you order that red bottle of wine, well, whatever you don't finish, you can always take home.
Right, you can. You can. The bottle is half empty and also half full.
There you go. Now, I'm wondering, for our listeners, as we're just about out of time here, where can they find out more about where to get the book and download the app and all those sort of things?
So my website is www.relationshipbarometer.com, and on the site I'll have a description of the book and what it does. You actually can click and do a preview of the book. It goes to an Amazon site. We're using their preview feature, but it's available on Nook and iBook too if someone wanted to do that. And it could be on print, on demand, or it could be on Kindle. And it describes the book and what it is trying to accomplish. It's gotten some good reviews. I'm trying not to be preaching and telling people what to do with their life. I'm just trying to open up their minds to why we sometimes stay in relationships too long, leave them too soon, try to understand what you're really looking for in getting or not in your relationship. And then the mobile app is described there too. And right now it's free. It's available on both the Apple Store and on Android, Google Play. And I'm not sure how long it's going to be free. Right now I'm letting it be free because I want people to experience it. But I'm also not quite sure that if people aren't willing to work on their relationship and put an investment in both of time and potentially of little money, whether they really want to improve their relationship. Sometimes if something's free, it's perceived as being valueless. And I'm not sure where I'm going to go with that now, but for now it's free.
And I'm sure anyone will figure it out, sure.
Yeah, and anyone that downloads it now is going to have it free. I'm not going to all of a sudden come in and charge them at some point. I really want this to help people and to really become a part of their life and just help them have good relationships, improve their relationships, and ideally not stay too long in unhealthy relationships.
Well, very good, Michael. I'm glad this is out there, and it certainly makes a lot of sense in relation, if you will, to a lot of the kind of books or, perhaps courses that are out there for people who want to create and develop and have good long-term or even great long-term relationships. And you said something that I think is pretty interesting. I don't know that so much free means to people that, well, maybe there isn't a whole lot of value here, but I think what's interesting to note about that idea that when it's not free, when you have to pay for something, you have to make a commitment to make it work so you get your money's worth. And I think the interesting thing about giving somebody something for free, especially a tool as valuable as this can be, I mean, this can be an extremely valuable tool, especially on the road to self-discovery, is that, you need to make that commitment. This isn't something you say, well, I'll go ahead and try it. Oh, it didn't work, so it's all that thing's fault. It's really about you and what you're willing to do. And if you're willing to make a commitment, it doesn't matter whether it's free or you pay $1,000 for this thing. It's going to work one way or the other because you've decided that's what you want to see happen.
Definitely. You've hit that well, and I think psychologically that is the big step, that step to make the commitment and to do it. And we're going to be trying to include some better feedback mechanisms to people to try to bring them back in, because people forget. It's like again, momentum, inertia takes hold. If you haven't been doing a diary or a journal, and most people don't, you're not just going to start and all of a sudden do it every day, because that's a change in habit. And we need to try to reinforce the light up your icon and let you know that you haven't done a check-in for a few days. And hopefully it's non-intrusive, but if you want to be aware and you're not doing that, then it's not going to help. It's not going to work unless you actually are doing it actively. And hopefully we can get people to do that as just a regular kind of thing that they do.
I think, too, to leave our listeners with, it was a really, I thought it was one of the best things I heard about relationship, and it comes from the movie Good Will Hunting. And it was a scene where Robin Williams is talking with Will, or Matt Damon, and he says, you're really afraid that she's going to discover that you're not perfect. Well, let me tell you something, sport. She's not perfect either, but the question is whether the two of you are perfect together. And I thought, there you go.
That's it. That really is
realizing, hey, we're flawed. That's cool, but let's see how flawless we can be together. That's the real mystery and the magic of what a relationship really should be. And I think that what you've produced out here is a wonderful way for people to come into that realm of self-discovery and wonder, how perfect are we together? And that really should be the question to answer.
Right. And not, I mean, it's great to strive for perfection, but to not be disappointed in terms of not being, because we're all imperfect beings. We make mistakes, but it's really, are you making each other feel good? Do you feel better being with this person than without them, and to what degree? And how can you make it better? How can you strive towards that goal of perfection, knowing you may never reach it, but the journey to get there is going to be great if you're both working together to try to strive for that.
So, Michael, one more time, go ahead and give out your website where people can find out more.
Thank you, Daniel. It's www.relationshipbarometer, barometer.com.
Very good. Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Thank you, Daniel. Really appreciate it.
You bet. We want to thank you, the listeners out there, for trying to strive and create better relationships, not just with yourself, but also with others as well. Pick up the Relationship Barometer Balancing app, and you can find out more also by discovering it at beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50. We encourage you to sign up for our weekly e-newsletter, kind of stay in the know of everything that we've got going on. We also can be followed at Facebook as well as Twitter at Beyond 50 Radio. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for joining us. This is the Beyond 50 radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.